Hello everyone. So for this video I'm going to do my best to retrace my steps um, on this painting. As you can see, I've made some progress with working out the overall composition. I've added a little bit of a background and some foreground elements, and in these remaining minutes I will be making some adjustments to the edges, doing some blending, and just some general painting, and maybe even talking a little bit about what's happening with the texture as I go. So right now, as you see, I'm going to a smaller brush and sampling that lighter background color. So the idea here is to use a smaller brush to sharpen the edges where I want things to be sharp. A lot of times in these kinds of studies, when we talk about chiaroscuro, representing a three-dimensionality on a two-dimensional surface with a pattern of lights and darks, we will sometimes, as a design decision, as a sort of an artistic decision, we will make some of the edges harder and some of the edges softer. I've mentioned this in at least one of our painting videos. We, as humans, do not have the ability to focus on everything at once, and so as a study, we can definitely, in a drawing, have everything in high focus. But when it comes to actually simulating how the eye behaves in the composition, in order to control where the audience looks, what's the area of interest, we can have some of the lights and darks, soft edges and hard edges. So at this point I'm going to try to have the composition lead the eye into the middle, into the center where I have the highest contrast, and that's where the objects are. They're pretty much the star of the show here. So that shadow in the foreground, that shadow shape in the foreground, what I'm doing now is just softening that shape so that it doesn't have the same sharpness in terms of edge to edge contrast as as the objects themselves do. Also, as you saw a few seconds earlier, I sampled the darkest cast shadow from the sphere and I started painting that color into that area. You'll also notice that I'm spending a lot of time zoomed out so I can see the whole composition. And this also keeps me from getting too bogged down in details too early on in the process. As I get closer, I'll start to see, a little later in this video, you'll start to see more of the texture, more detail. Here I've gone to a larger brush so I can cover more area. And with the brush being larger, we're going to see more of the brush tip expressing itself on the surface and creating its own texture. And this is kind of a unique brush because there is a texture included in the brush settings, but then the brush shape, the brush tip itself, as you can see, has its own pattern. So the act of scaling up and down is going to have a couple of effects depending on how you stroke with this kind of a brush. A single kind of stabbing action when you're just kind of tapping on the screen is going to leave the impression of the texture if it's at a fairly large scale, even if it's at a smaller scale, but it'll be less noticeable at a smaller scale. On the other hand, a stroke, a press and drag with that tip, using a texture like this or a brush tip like this one is going to give you more, something a little more similar to what you would expect from a paint stroke. Okay, so what you just saw was the background being softened again, just to reduce the amount of sharpness in that area. I'm bringing in a little more sharpness into the top of the object, at least the top of the box here. And if I decide later that I want to add, this a suggestion of a lid, the flaps of a lid, I can paint that in with a darker color. This whole thing was just right out of my imagination, so I'm just drawing from, memories of how I think these forms should look under a certain set of lighting conditions. Okay, so bringing in some light from the background. So these first hits with a larger, just kind of stabbing with the brush would give me the pattern. So now I'm stroking, kind of scrubbing or scumbling back and forth to get a smoother result. But even there, you're going to get some texture, mainly because there's some texture included in this brush's settings. Okay, now that edge is softer. So at any time, you can pause this video and then return to maybe, 3 to 5 minutes earlier and take a look at what we had, which was just fine as a drawing, as a study. But now I'm applying some theory, just my understanding of how we see objects, or how I might be able to, as a designer, direct the eye to certain areas. And so that arc along the bottom forms a little bit of a partial spiral leading into the cast shadow of the box. There's a set of diagonals in the box itself that point toward the sphere. The sphere has, of course, a circular shape, and the triangular shape of the cone has diagonals that direct the eye more or less vertically up and down. So it may be read as pulling the eye toward the group, or possibly pulling it up toward the vertex of the cone and then back down toward the box, and so on. But like I said, this is all theoretical. How we see things. I always struggle with these ideas as a student because I didn't necessarily see things the way that my instructor claimed that we would sort of normally see things. So take it all with a grain of salt. Approach these any study, any drawing, in a way that you find satisfying, but just be aware of that there are some ideas out there about how we can enhance the composition and control, how people might respond to it. I think all I'm doing now is just adding some more details to the cone. Maybe some suggestion of a crevice or a part. Same thing on the sphere. Why not? Sampling that shadow. Oh no, I think now I'm deciding to go over and add a little bit of reflected light on the rear of that box. Okay, so this is kind of going to wrap this up here. Like I said, the video's audio got a little corrupted, so just trying to do a quick re-narration of what happened, and I think we'll go ahead and wrap it up right here. All right, thanks for watching.